hacer estos discípulos que se reproducen.
Making these disciples that reproduce.
Más que una idea, que un sueño, es una realidad.
More than an idea, more than a dream, it's a reality.
Una visión de global.
A global vision.
Un evangelismo de tu comunidad.
A practical evangelism of our communities.
Automáticamente
automatically
vas a tener discípulos
you're going to have disciples
que tienen que convertirse en plantadores de iglesias.
Those disciples will turn into the church planter.
Quisiera enfocar en tres cosas lo que voy a compartir.
And I want to focus on three things, what I'm going to share.
He visto la multiplicación, para mí, siempre hablo de multiplicación, siembra y cosecha.
I'm always talking about multiplication, of sowing and reaping.
Desde que vino el camino del Señor.
From the moment that I gave my life to Christ, that's been what's been at the forefront of my message.
Cuando capturas esto,
and because I believe when you're able to capture this,
entonces en tu espíritu no hay tierra estéril.
Then in your spirit there's no place or no room that can be sterile or infertile.
Nosotros clasificamos los lugares, pero Dios no.
You know, we are the ones who usually kind of classify or categorize places, but God doesn't see it the way that we see it.
Entonces a veces solo vemos nuestra propia comunidad y nuestro entorno, pero no vemos el cuadro completo.
Sometimes we may be only focused or seeing our surroundings, our place, but we're not seeing the full picture, the big picture.
Entonces, si hablamos de generación sin límites,
so if we talk about a generation that is limitless,
es que no hay barreras y aquellos que venimos tal vez de primera generación no lo estamos capturando todavía.
You know, that means limitless means that there's no boundaries. There's nothing that can hold you. And so sometimes those of us who are maybe first generation in Christianity, we may not be understanding fully what it is that we're doing.
Algunos de nosotros visualizamos hacia adelante, pero también nos ha tocado trabajar con nuestra familia, alcanzándolos para Cristo.
Yeah, sometimes if you're first generation, not only are you working towards what's ahead of you, but you're also working in a way backwards because you're trying to reach your family members.
Y hay muchos que nos está costando con la familia.
And many of us who are in that position are having a great deal of difficulty reaching those in our family.
Comparto la historia cuando veo algunos que son como Cornelio o como el carcelero que en un día se bautizan todos.
I share the testimony. I'm amazed when I see a person like Cornelius in the Bible or the jailer that in a moment it just seems that the entire family, even friends, just come to the Lord.
O Lidia que dice que se bautizaron todos.
Or even Lydia in the Bible where it says that everyone in her household was baptized.
Y cuando usted ve esa familia viniendo a la iglesia, uno se entusiasma.
But when you see those families coming to church, you get excited.
Pero muchos de nosotros aún pastoreando no ha pasado nada en la familia.
But many of us, even though we've been pastoring for a while, we haven't seen much happen in our families.
Entonces nos toca ir siendo de testimonio para adelante a muchos y bendiciendo y también trabajando hacia atrás a nuestra propia familia.
So our job is we move forward, being a testimony, an example, reaching those who we're encountering as we're moving forward, but we're also looking back and reaching those in our own family.
Tuve el privilegio de ver a mi papá de rodillas con mi mami el mismo día aceptando a Cristo.
I had the privilege that in a meeting I was able to see both my father and mother on their knees receiving Jesus Christ.
Pero 25 años después de estarles predicando, orando y ayunando por ellos.
But that didn't happen until after 25 years of preaching to them, fasting for them, praying for them.
Es posible que nos identifiquemos con algunos de ustedes.
Maybe some of you identify with that story.
Y es fuerte eso.
And it's very strong. It's very hard at times.
A veces usted ve familias rápido que están viniendo todos al Señor y uno dice, wow, cuánto está tardando.
You have testimonies of people who seem to reach their family in such an aggressive and an accelerated manner, but you might be thinking, man, but what's wrong with me?
Pero hay
very hard.
Hay una promesa.
But there is a promise.
Cree tú y serás salvo tú y toda tu casa, hay que mantenernos.
If you believe, you and your household shall be saved, and we have to hold on to that and continue pressing on to that.
Pero este texto de cree tú serás salvo tú y toda tu casa.
But this verse that we quote so much about, you know, believe in you and your family, you and your family shall be saved.
En la cultura donde se predica el evangelio pareciera que es fácil.
In the culture where the gospel is being preached, it seems easy.
Porque usted llama y dice, mami, papi, ¿cómo estás? Dios te bendiga, oré por ti ayer.
Because you can call your family and say, Mom, Dad, how are you? How you doing? I was praying for you last night. God bless you.
Y hasta le contestan, Dios te bendiga, hijo.
And even the parents, they answer back. They say, well, God bless you too, my son, my daughter.
Pero ¿qué pasa a aquellos otros lugares donde no es predicado a Jesús?
But what happens in those areas where Jesus is not being preached?
Que tienes que vivir con la comunidad de la fe porque tu propia familia te corta la cabeza.
Where you literally have to leave your home and go live with the community of the faith, of the believers, because your own family is looking to try to behead you.
En nuestras culturas, incluso en un cumpleaños, en baby shower o cualquier cosa, hasta te invitan a orar.
In our culture, in the Latino culture, you have a lot of events that happen, baby showers, birthdays, different events, and they'll even invite you, knowing you're a believer, to come and ask you to even pray.
En los velorios te dicen, haga una oración.
Even in the funerals, they say, could you pray, please?
Entonces tenemos una apertura para hablar a los nuestros.
And so we have what you could describe as an open door to reach our people.
Yo quería estar en un velorio de gente islámica, un musulmán.
We were in a country and we wanted to experience what a Muslim funeral was like.
Entonces ya había tenido una experiencia con una familia judía que murieron.
I had already had an experience of being in a funeral accompanying a family who was Jewish.
Y decía yo, ¿cómo será un velorio de los judíos?
And I was saying, wow, I wonder how they do a funeral in the Jewish custom.
Y yo me fui a meter ahí.
And I was able to participate and be part of it.
Y hubo una gran nevada porque celebran varios días. Hubo una nevada muy fuerte.
And the way they do it is that it's a few days. And so during the time they were doing it, there was a great snowstorm in the area.
Y el rabino no llegó por la nieve.
And because of the weather conditions and the road, the rabbi was not able to make it to the day they were going to be doing.
Entonces la señorita que cantó la canción como de ópera.
And there was this young lady who even sang a song and sang. She's an opera singer, so she imagined it was amazing.
Y no llegó el rabino, entonces dije yo, aquí la hago yo.
And the rabbi was not able to make it, so I said, you know what? I think this is my chance.
Y hablé del Dios de Abraham, de Isaac y Jacob.
And so I stepped in and I began to share about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Y después me preguntaron, y traducido con ¿va?
And he was even translated, imagine, so they understood everything I was saying.
Me dijo la señorita que cantó, ¿dónde es su sinagoga?
And the young lady who sang the song asked me later, she said, Rabbi, where is your synagogue?
Por favor, ¿me podría dar la nota de la oración que usted hizo?
She said, could you please give me the outline of the notes of the prayer that you made?
El siguiente día el rabino me saludó, muy amable por haberle ayudado.
The next day I went back and the rabbi was there and he was so grateful. He said, thank you so much for helping and for helping this family.
Pero estábamos en un lugar islámico.
So we were in a Muslim country.
Y dice alguien que hay un muerto ahí.
And so we heard that someone had passed away, a young man had passed away.
Entonces me dijeron, por favor, vamos a ir al velorio, pero usted, por favor, se quede a un lado, no vaya a abrir la boca.
And so they gave me instructions prior. They said, listen, we're gonna take you guys to this family who's at the funeral, and so what we're gonna do is you have to stay in a corner, you don't look at anyone, don't say anything.
Vamos al velorio.
And so we go to the funeral.
En el primero de los rabinos no estaba Mr. Dennis.
In the first one with the rabbis, Dennis was not there.
Pero en el segundo sí.
But in the second one, he was.
Llego.
And so we get there,
y están llorando.
And obviously everyone's crying. People are weeping.
Diferente que los latinos.
They're weeping differently from the Latino culture.
Que el latino le meten hasta una hierba en la nariz porque se desmaya.
Because Latinos, you have to have like smelling salts and stuff because they fall down, they faint. You know, it's a whole chaos.
Pero cuando estoy ahí,
but while I'm there with these people,
está un hombre alto.
I see this very tall man.
Y sentí el impulso de irlo a abrazar.
And the moment I saw him, I felt this impulse to go and just hug him.
Y cuando lo abrazo,
and when I hug him,
él queda observando.
He just kind of stared.
Y le toqué la espalda.
And I just happened to put my hand on his lower back.
Entonces le dije al traductor, pregúntale qué pasó.
And so through a translator, I said, could you just ask this man what happened when
Toda la gente estaba observando.
And everyone, I had noticed that everyone that was in the house was looking straight at us.
Y empieza a moverse.
And the man, all of a sudden, he begins to move.
Y todo el enfoque fue a eso.
And all of a sudden, the entire focus went to that.
Pero las mujeres están completamente separadas.
But what happens is they divide, they separate. In one part they have all the men, and in another separate room they have all the women.
Y este hombre se fue corriendo
And this man, he ran out of our
y
room
trajo la esposa.
and went to get his wife in the
Me
other
la
room.
pone enfrente.
And he brought her right in front of us.
Me dice que le ponga
And
la
he
mano.
says, could you lay hands on my wife as well?
Y se cayó la señora.
And I did. When I laid hands, she
Y
fell to the
todos
ground.
en el velorio están asombrados.
And everyone in the funeral, now they're shocked. This woman's on the ground.
Le digo a Denny, filmar porque esto se va a poner
And
bueno.
I tell Dennis, get your phone out. You got to record this. This is going to be good.
Recibió una sanidad esa señora.
The woman received a tremendous healing in that moment.
Y ese hombre
And that man
fue a buscar una cama
went to go look for a bed.
y me la puso acá.
And he carried the bed and put it right in the space where we
Aquí
were.
estaba el muerto
You had the body here,
y me puso aquí una cama.
and then they put the bed right there.
Y delante de toda esa gente me dijo, acuéstate.
And in front of all the people, he said, lay down.
Y entonces me acuesto así como miedo.
And so I kind of hesitantly and a bit fearful, I lay down.
Y de ahí me dijo, para el otro lado.
And he said, no, I need you to turn, face down.
Y empezó a hacerme un tremendo masaje ese hombre.
And what he began to do is he began to massage. He gave me a massage.
Wow.
Wow.
La gente ya se había olvidado del muerto y conmigo acá.
Can you imagine the scene? Everyone had already forgotten why they were originally there. They were all looking at this massage I'm receiving on this bed.
Yo tengo que hablarte de cosas.
Y no sabíamos.
Y otra cosa es que no sabíamos que ellos dos eran el papá del muerto.
And what we didn't know was that those two are the parents of the young man who had passed away.
Imagínate.
So imagine
Todo lo que pasó ese día.
everything that happened in that moment.
Lo segundo es que era militar.
The second thing is that he was a man who had served in the army of his country for many years.
Y se nos abrió una gran puerta con Dennis.
And so a huge door opened up with Dennis.
Imagínate los recursos que tenemos en Dios para abrir puertas.
Imagine the resources we all have in God to open doors.
En culturas que no conocen de Jesús.
Open doors into cultures that have not yet known
Ahora
about Jesus.
piensa en esas culturas donde ahora tienen música cristiana, saben de iglesia, televisión y todo cristiano. Las puertas que tenemos abiertas y hay que ser un poquito más agresivos.
Yeah, imagine the doors. Now they're being exposed to Christian music, to the Bible, to messages. And so we have to be a bit more aggressive so that we can open the door completely.
Quisiera hablar con todo mi corazón a aquellos que están luchando con su propia familia.
And I want to speak with all my heart to those who may be having a struggle reaching their family.
Pero hay otros que se está haciendo difícil.
You know, that there may be some who are having great success, but there are others who are having great deals of difficulty.
Pero mantente firme,
But I just want to encourage by saying,
En
remain
oración,
firm,
en
remain
ayuno,
in prayer, fasting.
participa con ellos.
You know, participate with them. Don't alienate from them.
Haz un esfuercito más ahí en la casa de
You know,
ellos
go the extra mile when you're with them.
y usted va a ver cosas
And
extraordinarias.
I guarantee you're going to see extraordinary things.
Envíeles material,
Send them the link,
tómese
share,
fotos aquí y diga,
Take pictures
este es el
here.
lugar donde yo disfruto
and
la
say,
familia,
look,
la fe.
I'm in a place where I'm enjoying with my family of the
Y
faith.
empieza pa, pa, pa,
And you just begin to
a sembrar la semilla.
to sow the seed.
Quisiera decirte, voy a ir lo poquito que voy a hablar de la conferencia.
The little bit I'm going to share
He
in this time I have.
pasado a esto lo que te estoy diciendo.
I've come to share this that I'm saying.
La misión
The mission
que Dios nos ha dado
that God has given us,
es general, es global.
it's a global mission.
Es la manera del amor del Padre.
It's the love of the Father.
Uno lee este texto
You read this text,
y yo quisiera hablarle a los líderes aquí de células o pastores.
and I want to speak to the leaders here or pastors.
Muchos pastores
Many pastors
en los inicios de la iglesia,
in the early stages of the church,
cuando comenzamos,
when we begin,
somos evangelistas, somos tremendos evangelistas,
we're like tremendous evangelists.
somos tremendos plantadores.
We're tremendous planters, church planters.
Pero pareciera que cuando el grupo ya creció,
But it would seem that once that group has grown,
ya parece que perdimos el efecto del evangelismo
it's like we've lost that effect for the evangelism.
y perdimos el efecto de plantadores.
And we've lost that effect as a church planter.
Algo no está bien.
And so something isn't right.
Entonces vamos a balancearlo.
So we want to find some balance.
Por ejemplo,
For example,
¿cómo nosotros percibimos el amor del Padre?
how do we perceive the love of the Father?
A donde vayas.
Wherever you go.
Entonces sería la misión. La misión es que Jesús les transmite y les dice el mundo y las naciones.
Right? The vision, the mission that God transmits to them is the world, it's the nations.
Imagínense que les dice a unos pescadores, vayan por el mundo y vayan por las naciones.
Imagine he tells these fishermen, and many of them, he says, listen, go throughout the entire world and go to all the nations.
¿Qué noción tenían ellos? No estaba internet, no estaba Google.
What notion did they have of all the world and the nations? There was no internet, there was no Google.
Pero a ellos se les transmite una visión del mundo y de las naciones.
But Jesus transmits to them this vision, this mission of the nations and the world.
No tienen Biblia.
They don't have a Bible like we do today.
Murieron sin una Biblia en la mano.
They all died without carrying a Bible in their hand.
Predicaron y sacudieron ciudades sin una Biblia.
Yeah, they preached and they won cities, entire cities over without a Bible.
Piensen eso.
Think about that.
Ellos no era como nosotros que necesitamos un montón de textos bíblicos.
They weren't like us that we have to begin to throw all the memorized verses that we have.
Hasta los ponemos en pantalla.
Sometimes we even put them on the screen.
Cuando estamos ahí en unos países en África que están convirtiendo grupos étnicos,
When we're in some countries where we're seeing a lot of the tribes, those who are worshiping ancestral spirits, they're coming to the Lord.
ellos no tienen Biblia
And they don't have a Bible.
y todavía no tienen Biblia.
And even to this day, they don't have a Bible.
Usted no va a ir a decirles, pues busque Juan 3:16 y empezar a tirar de
You can't stand in front of them and say, hey, could
De
you
la
turn to
hermenéutica.
John 3:16 and start with all the different strategies of how to teach
Son
and preach.
millones que están viniendo a Cristo sin Biblia.
But it's millions that are coming to Christ without carrying a Bible.
Pero tienen la palabra de Dios.
But what they do have is the word from God.
Tienen la palabra de Dios.
They have the word from God.
Wow, qué tremendo.
It's tremendous.
Aquí hay unos de los muchachos que están trabajando con esta gente.
Amongst us here, we have some of those who are working in these areas.
Son héroes, de veras.
They're heroes. In my eyes, they're heroes.
Cómo penetran en las comunidades.
How they're able to just penetrate into these communities.
De Jesús les transmitió visión
And so Jesus transmits
de
visions.
naciones,
Visions for nations,
países
countries,
y del mundo.
and the world.
Por eso aquí de tal manera amó Dios al...
That's why it says, for God so loved the world.
Tengamos una visión global, piensen eso.
Let's have and keep a global vision.
Tal vez por ahora no vas a un lugar, pero sueña, visualiza, ora, interceda por el mundo.
Maybe as of now, you're not traveling to another country, but visualize, dream, pray, and intercede for all the world.
Abramos el panorama.
Let's open up our viewpoint.
Cuando usted está aquí, busque un pastor que sea fuera de su país. Hombre.
While you're here, take advantage of the people who've come and look for someone who's not from your country.
Pregúntele.
Ask them.
Ahorita llegué a un lugar y tenía un hombre de Eritrea.
I came to a place, I went to a place, and I found a man from Eritrea.
Hace 2 semanas.
About 2 weeks ago.
Y este hombre es predicador porque Eritrea, todos hace 20 años, los que predican de Jesucristo lo sacaron. Y casi no hay uno de los que predicadores del Evangelio que fueron así un poco expuestos, está libre.
Right, in this area, in this nation, about 20-something years ago, many of those who were preaching the gospel, they basically kicked them out of the country. And those who remained, they've imprisoned. Very few are still free today.
Hay unos que tienen cerca de 20 años metidos en contenedores muy calientes y la mayor parte perdieron la vista del calor. Están ciegos.
There are many of them who even were arrested and imprisoned and thrown into very hot dungeons where they're there, they've even lost their sight because of the terrible conditions they're in. They've gone blind.
Entonces cuando uno ora por estas personas,
And so when you pray for these people,
o hablas con ellos,
or you even just get a chance to talk
esto
to
te
these people,
enriquece porque es el cuerpo de Cristo.
it enriches you because it's the body of Christ.
¿Me entiendes? Te enriquece.
It enriches you.
A veces venimos y compras una hamburguesa con el primo hablando de lo mismo y cómo está y cómo está. Lo mismo. ¿Por qué no buscas a otro de otra ciudad, de otro pueblo y enriquecerte con lo que Dios está haciendo en diferentes lugares?
Sometimes we're so comfortable, we'll sit down with our friend, our family, we'll get a burger or something to eat, and we'll talk about the same things over and over, the same stories. Why not look for someone from a different
Dedique
culture, a
un
different
ratito,
place?
así ande cansado, pero cuando hablas, hable y hable y hable y hable, pregunte y pregunte, pregunte y enriquezcase.
When you take advantage of this time and sit with people and talk to them, and ask questions and ask and enrich yourself.
Sí, cada plática es un libro.
Because every conversation you can write a book about.
Denle un aplauso. Aquí estamos teniendo
Give
un
the Lord an
panorama mundial.
applause. We're having a global panoramic view.
Entonces tenemos que tener una visión global, la gran comisión.
So our vision has to be global. That's the Great Commission.
Pero la segunda es
But the next one is
el evangelismo.
evangelism.
Usted puede tener una visión global,
You can have a global vision,
pero tienes que tener un proyecto personal, cómo evangelizar,
But you
cómo aprender
also-
herramientas de evangelismo.
you also need to have a personal plan of how to win souls, of evangelism, how to win people for Christ.
Es tu comunidad.
It's your community.
Fíjese que es bueno hacerse aficionado de un micrófono sin ganar almas.
You know, it's so easy, and it seems to be very popular to become a fan of carrying a microphone without ever winning a soul for Christ.
Yo he estado haciendo encuestas de ministros que hablan, conferencias, y les digo, decime la última alma que te ganaste. Y uno queda sorprendido porque no han ganado almas.
I've interviewed many speakers, some who are well known and then who speak very much, and I said, well, tell me, when was the last time you won a soul for Christ? And you're amazed sometimes because it's been a long time.
Porque estamos a esta costumbre en estos países, ¿verdad? De decir, levante la mano el que quiere a Cristo ahorita, ahí hay una almita, ¿cuántos? 2, 3. Y llevar una suma y dice, hoy aceptaron 20.
Because many times we have that custom where you're in a meeting like this and you say, okay, if you want to receive Christ, just raise your hand. And you start making the prayer and then you say, okay, we counted them down. It's about 20, 25 people.
Ese es evangelismo de micrófono, no le
But
creo
that's
mucho.
a microphone evangelism that you can't really trust too much. You take it with a grain of salt.
¿Cómo trabajamos con evangelismo personal?
But how do we work on personal
¿Cómo se
evangelism?
llama la persona que evangelizaste y ganaste para Cristo?
Where you can ask someone, well, what's the name of the person
O nos
that you
hici-
won for
o nos
Christ?
hicimos expertos de música, micrófono y todo eso y perdimos esas partes tan lindas que es el
Or
evangelio.
have we become such experts in music and in scenery and microphones that we lost that passion for winning souls for Christ?
Entonces podés tener un panorama global
So you can have a global view, a global vision,
y la gran comisión.
and thinking about the Great Commission.
Y oiga bien, y Jesús, para destaparles un poquito el cerebro, que es una visión global,
Right? And Jesus, kind of to open up their understanding so that they understand what it means to have a global vision,
Jesús se apuró
Jesus quickly,
y dijo, voy a morir el día de la Pascua,
he said, I'm going to die during the Passover,
para que se asocie con el Cordero de Egipto.
so that it could be associated with the lamb that they sacrificed back in Egypt.
Me voy a estar con estos muchachos como 40
He
días
says, I'm going to stay with these guys about 40 days
en cuerpo
in
glorificado.
a glorified body,
Y les voy a dar chance de 10 días para que se vuelvan desde Galilea a Jerusalén otra vez,
and then I'm going to give them about a span of 10 days to go from Galilee back to Jerusalem,
para esperar la llenura del Espíritu Santo.
so that they will wait there in Jerusalem for the filling of the Holy Spirit.
Eran 50 días,
It was 50 days.
exactamente desde la Pascua.
From Passover to the day of Pentecost was
Se
50
llama
days.
fiesta Pentecostés
It's
de los
called
judíos.
the Feast of Pentecost. It's a Jewish feast.
Y Jesús desde arriba está con el Padre diciendo, esperemos, esperemos.
And
esperemos.
I can imagine Jesus seated with the Father saying, just wait,
Yo me
just hold on.
imagino que estaban entusiasmados por enviar la llenura del Espíritu Santo antes.
I can imagine they were excited to pour out the filling of the Holy Spirit even before.
Y en la sesión de trabajo que hicieron,
But in the staff meeting that they had in heaven,
espérate un momentito,
they said, no, hold on, wait a second.
esperemos la fiesta de Pentecostés.
Why not wait for the Feast of Pentecost?
Cuando vengan todos,
When everyone is
de
gathered
toda nación
from all the
y
nations
lengua,
and tongues.
y allí los agarramos.
And that's what we'll do it.
Y habían venido de todo lugar
And that day they had come people from all around, from all
y
the
de
nations
toda
under the sun,
lengua,
and all languages.
no a un culto pentecostés,
They didn't come to a Pentecostal revival meeting,
como le llamamos ahora.
as we call it now.
Ellos habían venido a su fiesta
They
judía,
came to their Jewish feast.
pero ahí habían 120 adorando a Dios.
But in a place there was 120 worshiping God.
Y vino un viento recio
And a rushing wind came by.
un temblor
Like a shaking.
y como fuego sobre las cabezas.
And fire came to rest upon their heads.
Hablaron lenguas.
They began to speak in other tongues.
¿Y qué cree que hablaban?
And what do you think they were speaking?
La lengua de todo aquel montón de gente que andaba por allá en su fiesta.
They were speaking the languages of all those who were in their feast that had come from all over the world.
Y como nunca falta una oreja,
And because there's always someone who's nosy, their ears always perk
allá
up.
están gritando en tu idioma, anda,
Hey,
acércate.
they said, hey, I think someone's screaming over there
Allá
in your
están hablando
language.
en
Go
tu
over
idioma,
there.
acércate.
Hey, I hear someone speaking your dialect. Go over there.
Y empezaron a llegar.
And they all began to gather.
Y ese día se convirtieron 3,000
And
personas.
that day alone, 3,000 came to the Lord.
Sin estar anunciando Activa, que venga,
Without
que la
having-
entrada, que los brazaletes,
Without having to promote or register online for Activa or anything like that.
que el conjunto, que la pantalla, que
That
está
if we have
linda.
the screen, if we have the worship team, it's beautiful, but they didn't have
Pero
that back then.
tenían el lenguaje del Espíritu.
But they had the language of the Spirit, and that was more than enough.
¿Y sabe qué pasó?
And you know what happened?
Los discípulos vinieron para Jerusalén
The disciples came back to Jerusalem,
y los que llevaban la experiencia pentecostal se fueron para su casa.
but those who received that experience in Pentecost went back to their homes.
Yo creo que estos 120 vinieron a hacer los cultos que llamamos nosotros hoy en día.
I think those 120 are the ones who started with these services or these worship services that we have now.
A comprar un terreno.
They said, you know, we should buy a plot of land.
Le voy a poner a Alejandro Colindres
I'm going to call
Ministerio.
it Alejandro Colindres Ministry
El otro día
International.
alguien me dijo, Alejandro Colindres no se puede
The other
pronunciar.
day, someone came to me and they were counseling. They said, you know what, Alejandro Colindres, that's very mouthy. You can barely pronounce that.
Mejor ponerle Alex Collins.
You should call yourself Alex Collins.
Alex Collins.
Alex Collins.
Por favor.
Con acento y todo.
Mr.
With an accent and
Jefferson.
everything.
What is
How
that?
would you say,
Alex?
what's the name, Alex?
Pronounce
Could you
good.
say it? Alex.
Collins.
Alex Collins. Ah. Collins.
Estos manes se fueron con la experiencia de Pentecostés a cada lengua a comenzar células, papa.
No, these people that left Jerusalem to go back to their places, they went back to be sharing with their people to start cell groups in
No
those
podían
areas.
apagar lo que habían en ellos.
Because they couldn't put out the fire that had been set inside of them.
Necesitamos ese fuego.
We need that kind of
Las
fire.
casas en fuego.
The homes on
Tu
fire.
familia en fuego.
Your family on fire.
La comunidad en fuego.
Our communities on fire.
Evangelismo.
Evangelism.
El que creyere,
Those who believe
fuere
and
bautizado,
are baptized,
salvo.
they'll be saved.
Hagámoslo simple.
Let's make it simple.
El evangelismo.
The
Si
evangelism.
tenés una visión global
If you have a global vision
y el evangelismo es práctico,
and evangelism is practical,
¿qué es lo que viene?
then what happens next?
Lo siguiente es discípulos.
The following thing is disciples.
Y viene algo que se llama plantación de
It's
iglesias.
something that's called church planting.
Tenemos que comenzar en un lugar.
We need to start somewhere.
La plantación de iglesias.
Church planting.
¿Sabe cómo lo dijo Dios en el huerto a Adán
Do you know how God described church planting to Adam in the Garden of Eden
y a Eva?
and to Eve?
Fructifiquen
He said, be fruitful
y multipliquen.
and multiply.
Podemos fructificar.
You can be fruitful.
A veces nosotros vemos mucho fruto en la iglesia
Sometimes in our churches, we're very fruitful.
y a veces nos entusiasmamos con el fruto.
And we're fruitful and we get so excited because of being so
Pero se
fruitful.
nos hace difícil sacar semillas para multiplicar.
But sometimes we get so excited that it becomes very difficult to begin to sow seeds and
Piense
multiply.
cuánto tiempo lleva su iglesia solo soñando en la multiplicación
Think how long your church has only been dreaming about multiplication.
y hasta hacemos una serie de cosas dinámicas para multiplicar.
And we do a whole bunch of activities and different things so that we could try to multiply.
Pero si fructifica
But if you're fruitful
y hay fruto,
and there is fruit,
la multiplicación es natural.
then multiplication will become something natural.
Aunque le llamamos hoy en día plantadores de iglesia,
Even though maybe we have terms for it today, or church planters or church planting.
no sé cuántos nombramientos hay.
I don't know how many different names or labels we can put on
Y
it.
ahora le llaman unción apostólica y profética.
And
Si
now if
piensas
someone
en
is in
algo
that, they
así,
begin to think about, well, this must be something apostolic,
somos
prophetic.
inventores.
And we were so good at making things up.
Pero ¿cuándo comenzamos a hacerlo?
But the question is, when will we begin to actually do it?
Una visión de global,
A global vision.
un evangelismo de tu comunidad.
A practical evangelism of our communities.
Automáticamente
Automatically,
vas a tener discípulos
you're going to have disciples.
que tienen que convertirse en plantadores de iglesias.
Those disciples will turn into the church planters.
En todo lugar tienes que tener una visión de plantar
In
iglesias.
every place, we have to have vision for church
Y plantar
planting.
iglesias no es porque tengas presupuesto,
And church planting has nothing to do if you have the budget or not.
o no es porque agarres un pastor y le dices, le transmití la visión que usted dice, y ya tengo otra iglesia más, solo es que está agarrando otra iglesia.
And it's not also, church planting is not about going to another pastor in his church saying, I told them the vision and now they want to be part of us, so I've planted a church. That's not church planting.
Plantar iglesias es comenzar de cero.
Church planting means you start from nothing.
Aunque se vea fea la foto cuando comienza.
Even though the picture's not going to be very popular when you first take it.
¿A cuánto le gusta transmitir y poner en vivo que salga toda esta gente?
How many love to go live on their social media and they show all the people that are here, the great number of people?
Otros tomar video cuando la gente cae.
Others take pictures when people fall on the ground. No.
Pero ¿cuántos
But how many?
nos gusta tomar videos cuando los dos o tres y estás
How
comenzando?
many of us take video when maybe you only have 2 or 3 and you're beginning?
Pero estás viendo la multiplicación.
But you're beginning to see the
Estás
multiplication
viendo el fruto en
even
ellos.
there because you're seeing the fruit
Estás
in them.
visualizando.
You're visualizing.
No te intimide nada con lo poquito.
Don't let anything intimidate you if you only start with a few.
Si es en la casa, en la sala, en la cocina, o debajo de un árbol, nada te puede intimidar.
If it's in a home, in a kitchen, a dining room, even under a tree, don't let anything intimidate you.
Ya. Comencemos así.
Let's begin this way.
Yo creo en plantación de iglesia
I believe in church
y
planting,
quisiera transmitirlo,
and I want to transmit it.
pero a veces uno sufre cuando ves que plantas iglesias y la otra persona ni siquiera se fija en el tiempo y están celebrando aniversarios.
But it's sad when you plant churches, and then the people sometimes don't even have the sense of the timing, and they're only reserved to celebrating anniversaries.
Es más fácil contar los años de ministerio que decir, wow, ser honesto y decir, estoy entero, no he hecho nada para que estar celebrando, mejor voy a predicar el evangelio.
It's easier to count the days, the years, and celebrate them than to think, you know what? Man, I haven't been doing anything. I need to get to working.
Vamos. Entonces, mire lo que dice, hablando del trabajo con los discípulos, con una visión de plantar iglesias.
Right,
Lo estoy viendo ahora.
I'm seeing this now when we talk about this church planting and disciples naturally church planting. I'm seeing it now.
Lo que aprendiste,
He says in the following slide, what you learned from me,
Timoteo 2:2.
2 Timothy 2:2.
Lo que aprendiste,
What you learned,
si aprendiste algo,
if you learn something from me,
pues enséñalo.
well, then teach that to someone else.
Pero a veces queremos solo nosotros enseñar.
But sometimes we're the only ones that want to teach.
Hombre, si hay un montón que Dios les ha dado esa gracia.
No, there's a lot of people that have this grace.
No, nosotros no somos los de la foto.
We're
En
not,
Dios,
we're not in God. We're not the only ones in the picture.
la iglesia es un cuerpo.
The church is a body.
Amamos y respetamos a los pastores y todo, pero ellos no son el Dios que teníamos antes en otras religiones.
We love our pastors and our leaders, but they're not the gods that we had in other religions,
Y que tenemos que verlos así como para arriba.
that we kind of have to look up to be able to see them.
Si más bien dice que nosotros somos los que nos toca servir a la gente y echarlos de la espalda.
But it says it's the opposite. We are the ones that have to carry the people on our shoulders.
Tenemos que ponernos abajo.
We need to be the ones that are below.
Entonces lo que aprendiste,
And so what you learned,
esto enseña.
this is what we have to teach.
Y el otro enseña a otros.
And then those you teach will teach
En
others.
este pasaje
So in this passage,
vemos 4 generaciones
we see
impactadas.
4 generations being impacted
Así de rápido.
in an accelerated way.
4 generaciones.
4 generations.
Por ejemplo, aquí hay pastores que salieron de la iglesia.
For example, many pastors here, they started their walk in Christ in the church,
Que
in our church.
son la mayoría.
And that's the majority of them.
Estos pastores van y plantan una iglesia
These pastors, they plant a church
por lo que oyeron.
because of what they heard.
¿Dónde está lo que ellos están enseñando a los otros para que se reproduzcan?
And so the question is, okay, are they also teaching others so that those others that they're reaching could also
Entonces,
multiply or reproduce?
simultáneamente la iglesia estaría reproduciéndose con un crecimiento que se llama exponencial.
And so if we were to do that effectively, the church would have a growth that we would call it to be exponential.
Pero en esta cultura
But in this culture,
todo está como difícil.
everything seems very difficult.
¿Por qué?
Why?
Porque nosotros queremos copiar otros modelos.
Because sometimes we copy other models.
Las buenas sillas,
We want the nice chairs.
el estilo.
We want the style.
Y entonces eso nos va a llevar mucho tiempo.
And you know what? In order to be able to do that, that's going to take a long time.
Eso te lleva mucho tiempo.
That's going to take too long.
Si usted va a ver los 2 años que conseguimos un lugarcito ahí que es rentado en Fraternidad de Stanford.
If you go see the Stanford Church, not far from here, a space that we've been renting for the past couple of years,
Alguna gente dice, wow, qué bonito este local.
some people come, they walk in and say, wow, this is a beautiful space, Pastor.
Pero hemos andado 36 años
But what
de
they-
escuela en escuela, en nevadas, en fríos.
But sometimes they ignore or don't know that we spent 36 years in the weather, in the cold, and late at night, moving from place to
Y en
place.
ninguno de los lugares nos dejaron donde tener los instrumentos. Siempre teníamos que andarlos buscando y desarmando.
And none of the places where we went or where we were during those years ever gave us a space for storage. So everything we carried, we had to bring back with us.
Algunos, la mayor parte de aquí ni habían nacido cuando hicimos esto.
Some of you who are here probably weren't even born at that time when we were doing this.
Entonces, no, por favor, no vendas el producto terminado a la gente.
So don't sell the finished product to the people,
Porque la gente se te va a decepcionar.
because then people will become disillusioned.
Enséñalo de cero.
Let's teach them how to work from scratch,
Y a poquito.
little by little,
Los ratos libres.
in those free times,
Abriendo la obra.
opening the work,
Haciendo las cosas con amor.
doing things with love.
Si no hacemos eso,
If we don't do
que
that,
son los procesos,
which are the processes,
entonces vas a estar copiando cosas.
then we're just going to be copying things.
Marcas.
We're going to be copying
Y
brands.
te vas a cansar.
And you know what? You're going to get exhausted.
Y no vas a poder transmitir modelos que son productibles
And you're not going to
o
be able,
reproducibles.
you're not going to be able to transmit models that are actually reproducible.
Lo que estaba diciendo aquí en el contexto,
What I was saying in the context of this
a Timoteo
to Timothy,
no se refiere a cosas,
it's not talking about things,
se refiere a vida,
it talks about life,
lo que aprendiste.
what you learned.
¿Sabe que la mayor parte se habla de sufrimiento, de dolores?
You know, the majority you hear about in the Bible, you see it talks about pains and
Predicar el
suffering,
evangelio en circunstancias
of
difíciles.
preaching the gospel in the midst
Eso
of
enseña al
difficult.
otro.
You teach that to others,
Y que el otro enseña a
and
otro.
then they will teach it yet to others.
Si no ponemos atención, el tiempo se va rápido.
If we don't pay attention to it, time is just going to fly
Y cuando
by.
acuerdas, dijiste, se fue el tiempo.
And before you know it, you're going to be saying, man, where did time go?
Y quiero decirte que si estamos pensando en las cosas que perecen, ahí vamos a pasar todo el tiempo.
And I got to tell you, if we're only focused on the things that are temporary, that get ruined, then we're going to spend our entire time there.
Pero nosotros estamos sembrando en lo eterno.
But God is sowing into the eternal.
Yo quisiera dejar esto para terminar.
And so I kind of want to close here, and I want to leave this last thought with you.
Cuando comenzamos aquí en Connecticut,
When we began here in Connecticut,
cuando nos movilizamos de Nueva York,
when we moved from New York,
teníamos un grupo tal vez como de unas 25 personas.
we had about maybe 25 people, a group of 25 people.
Y entonces decidimos hacer un concierto.
And so we decided to have a concert.
Porque no soy persona de concierto, nada, pero digo, hay que probar a ver.
I'm not much for concerts, but I said, you know what, I think we should test it out. Let's test the waters.
Entonces invitamos a un rockero pintoso
And so we invited a rock band.
y de esos que de mi estilo así, de música loca.
You know, rock band, which is my style, that crazy music, you know what I mean?
Pero entonces el hombre venía de una banda, ¿verdad? De esas que estaba impactando.
You know, this man and his band, they were having a lot of impact at that time.
Y entonces tiramos los papelitos, invitaciones
So
y
we
fuimos a un lugar ahí a que lo
To
rentaran.
send out flyers, we rented a space for this concert here in the city.
Y entonces usted sabe que uno tenemos ayunando por el concierto.
And you know, we were fasting for the concert, you know.
Hicimos una vigilia por
We
el
even
concierto.
had a prayer meetings, all
Y
night
usted va a
prayer
ver que
meetings,
entonces se
vigils.
pone bueno, ¿va?
You know, we're going to be praying and this is going to be good. You're going to see God
Y era lo
move.
primero que hacíamos en el área.
And it was maybe one of the first big events in quotations that we were doing in the area.
Y dice uno de los ministros del equipo,
And one of the ministers of the team says,
yo los voy a ir a buscar,
you know what? I'm going to go look for them.
a los músicos.
I'm going to go pick up the band.
El otro dice, yo voy también, dice.
The other one says, you know what? I'm going to go with you.
Ok, nos vemos, se fueron.
All right, so they left.
El concierto era, ellos andaban, se fueron desde aquí a Canadá, a Montreal.
They drove from Stanford all the way to Montreal, Canada.
Habían estado en un concierto allá
They were in the concert the night before.
y entonces ellos llegaron en la madrugada para recogerlos.
And so they came, you know, very late at night. They picked them up.
Y usted sabe que cuando están esas cosas uno está orando hasta por el tiempo, que no haga viento, que no haya lluvia, que no vaya a nevar.
And you know, when those things, you're going to have something like that, you're always praying, God, don't let it rain, don't let it snow, don't let
Se
the
vino una
weather be
nevada,
bad.
papá.
And you know what? There was a great snow that day.
Wow, pero lo que le voy a contar, esto te quiebra, porque mire,
But what I'm going to tell you next, I think it'll touch you, it'll break you.
tipo 1 de la tarde,
I'm talking about like about 1 in the afternoon, the day of the concert.
recibo la llamada que
I received
jamás
the
hubiera querido
call
oír en mi vida.
that I would have never wanted to receive in my entire life.
Me dice, llorando, gritando, pastor, tuvimos un accidente.
And I get the call, and on the other side of the phone, I hear the person almost screaming, saying, Pastor, we had an accident.
Hay un muerto.
Someone has passed away.
Y quedo frisado.
And I was frozen in that moment.
Y digo, ¿qué se hace?
I said, what do you do in this case?
Y estoy ahí con el teléfono.
And I'm on the phone and trying
Me
to
dicen,
figure
¿en
it
qué
out.
dirección están?
And I said, well, where are you?
Y estaban como a 1 y media de
And
acá.
they were just about an hour and a half from Stanford.
Y soy de las personas que no hago mucho escándalo, ni con mi esposa, agarro el carro, me voy.
And I'm the type of person, I don't like to cause a lot of chaos or be too dramatic. I just took the car. I didn't even tell my wife. I took
Y
the
hay
car
un
and I
cuadro
went.
muy feo.
And when I get there, the scene is terrible.
En el accidente, la persona se sale por la ventana,
In the accident, the person who passed away, they flew out the window,
casi se corta la cabeza,
almost beheaded. It was terrible.
muere
And
instantáneamente.
died instantaneously.
Están todo el caos ahí.
There's a whole chaos there.
Hay unos golpeados.
Some of the band members were also hurt in the accident.
Cuando llego al hospital,
When I get to the hospital,
encuentro al líder
I find the leader of the
muy
band.
preocupado.
He's very much worried.
Solo me acuerdo que lo abrazaba.
I just remember all I could do was just hug him.
Y no hayas que decir.
And you don't know what to say in that moment.
Y entonces le digo, voy a llamar a la familia del muerto.
And I said, you know what? I want to call that young man who passed away. I want to call his family.
Y cuando voy a llamar a la familia del muerto, es como que le devolví la vida a este muchacho.
And when I told him that I would be the one to call the family and let them know the news, it's like life came back into the young man, the
Cuando
band
hago la
leader.
llamada a la mamá,
When we call, the mother's the one that answers.
le digo, señora, hermana, hay que decirle,
And I say, sister, I didn't know what to say, how to address her.
yo le tengo una noticia.
I said, listen, I have some news for you.
Me dijo, yo sé qué es.
And she said, Pastor, I already know what you're going to say.
El Espíritu me despertó
She said, the Holy Spirit woke me up
y me habló sobre mi hijo.
and spoke to me about my son.
Solo me dijo esto,
And all he said was this,
Señor, pastor,
Pastor,
no se preocupe.
don't worry.
No espere que yo le voy a hacer una demanda.
Don't think that I'm going to try to pursue some kind of lawsuit or anything.
Descanse y crea lo que Dios le ha puesto.
I want you to have peace and rest and believe in what God has asked you to do.
Abracé a ese muchacho
I hugged that young man.
y entonces le digo, ¿qué pensás hacer?
And I said, well, what do you guys think? What are you going to do?
Y él me dijo, anoche
And he said, last night,
en Canadá
when we were at the concert in Canada,
estábamos adorando
while we were worshiping,
y canté esta canción.
I sang one of our songs, the song that we sang
Y
to close.
sentía como si Dios me estaba hablando.
And he said, but this time when we
Yo
sang it,
quisiera
it's
creo que
like
esta
God
canción porque-
was calling me.
Porque esta canción, este evento me marcó la vida tan fuerte.
He said, this song, it marked me so much.
No en miedo,
Not towards fear,
sino es como haber nacido a algo poderoso.
but it's like something powerful was birthed in that moment.
Porque hay que tomar decisiones no basadas como te sientes, sino basadas en lo que Dios está
Because
haciendo.
your decisions have to be made not on what you feel, but on what the Lord is saying.
Escuche esto.
Listen to this.
Este fue el concierto de todos los muchachos.
These are young men. Just gonna play the song. Just I think that goes with the video.
Puedes tener todo el mundo a tus pies, puedes tener toda fama y poder, pero ¿de qué servirá? ¿De qué servirá si está fuera tu última canción? Si está fuera tu última canción, tu última canción.
Pero ¿sabe qué pasó ese día?
But you know what happened that day?
Dejaron el muerto allá
They had to leave the body in the place where the accident occurred,
y vinieron a hacer el concierto.
and they still came to do the concert.
Ese día fueron marcados muchos muchachos.
That day, many young people were marked by that testimony.
Me recuerdo que el que estaba tocando la batería no podía estar sentado por sus golpes y solo tocaba.
I remember the drummer couldn't even sit to be on the drum throne to be able to play. He just kind of had to stand and do what he could because of his injuries.
Pero Dios me dijo algo.
But God said something.
Haz algo rápido,
He said, do something quickly
porque algo están haciendo.
because something's being birthed in this moment.
Eso hace 20 años.
This was 20 years ago.
¿Sabes quién venía manejando?
You know who was driving?
Denis.
Dennis was driving.
Denis se cansó
Dennis got tired,
y después pasa el carro a Kenny.
and then Dennis got sleepy, and he had Kenny drive, the other young man who was with them.
Cuando oramos por Denis,
When we prayed for Dennis,
es como haber liberado algo
it's having delivered something.
y sembrado una semilla.
It's like we sowed a seed.
Parate, Rodi.
Roddy, if Roddy's here,
Rodi, Gloria.
Roddy and Gloria are here.
Nos saluda a Kenny.
Kenny's parents.
Ahora
Pastors.
Kenny sirve por el mundo.
Now Kenny is someone who serves the
Quédate
Lord
parado,
all
por favor.
around the world.
Rodi, Gloria pastorea
Roddy and Gloria are pastors,
y ese día nació Denis
and
también
that day Dennis was also born
a las misiones.
to missions.
Capturó algo,
It's like something was captured in that time.
porque cuando mueres,
Because when you die,
el sueño nunca muere.
the dream never dies.
Oiga la canción
If you listen to that song,
que compuso Edgar
a song that the same brother, Edgar, who's the leader of the band,
a este muchacho.
That
Y
he-
después vamos
a
a porque
song
se
he-
sentía hoy
and
que
we're going to pray, and today I just kind of felt,
el Señor está marcando a tanta gente
I
acá,
feel that God is marking so many people here.
porque no vamos a perder el tiempo.
Because I don't think it's not time to waste time.
Hay un sello para muchas personas.
There's a seal for many people. If we could just play the next song.
En aquel lugar te volveré a ver y te podré abrazar y sé que cuando el tiempo ya no exista más estaremos juntos del otro lado de la eternidad.
Inclina tu rostro ahí donde estás.
If you just bow your head there where you are.
Padre, gracias
Father, thank you
porque nos marcaste
because you marked us
para una misión.
for a mission.
Gracias, Señor,
Thank you, Lord,
porque nos abriste el panorama.
because you opened up the panorama.
Visualizamos el mundo, las lenguas, las razas.
We visualize the world, the nations, the races,
Las naciones.
the nations,
Las comunidades.
the communities,
La ciencia, la sabiduría para penetrar nuestras comunidades,
the
Señor.
knowledge, the wisdom to penetrate into our communities.
Ese evangelismo práctico, simple,
That practical, simple evangelism,
alcanzar a otros para Cristo.
reaching others for Christ,
Hacer estos discípulos que se reproducen.
making these disciples that reproduce.
Más que una idea, que un sueño, es una realidad.
More than an idea, more than a dream, it's a reality.
No se trata de nombres que le pongamos al programa o de materiales que consigamos de discipulado.
It's not about the names that we call the program or the materials of discipleship that we teach.
Se trata de corazones.
It's about hearts.
Se trata de las vidas.
It's about lives.
De transmitir en esos hombres y mujeres vida.
Transmit to those people life.
Reprendemos todo trauma,
We rebuke all trauma,
toda imposibilidad que teníamos,
everything that seemed impossible to us,
toda limitación.
every limitation.
La hacemos fuera, la apartamos.
We cast it out, we move it aside.
Sí, en el nombre de Jesús.
In Jesus' name.
Aquí están los plantadores de nuevas obras.
The planters of new works are here.
Padre, la visión
The vision
de entrenar
of
misioneros,
training missionaries,
pero también la visión de plantar las iglesias,
but also the vision of planting churches,
de plantar estas iglesias, Señor,
planting these churches, Lord,
de volver a los nuevos
of
comienzos.
coming back to the new beginnings.
Líbranos, Señor,
Deliver us, Lord.
líbranos
Deliver us
de la sangre derramada
from the blood that has been shed,
que reclama.
the blood that claims.
Padre, gracias por aquellos
Father, thank you for those
que fueron traspasados a ese lugar eterno.
who were transferred into that eternal place.
Gracias por ellos.
Thank you for them.
Gracias por los que están ahora mismo,
But thank you also for those who are here now,
que estamos en el turno.
who are doing their turn.
Yo puedo ver esa marca aquí en muchos.
I can see that mark in many,
Muchos.
many.
Veniste a este lugar
You come to this place
no para ver milagros que pasen en otros,
so that not just to see miracles happen in others,
sino para ver un milagro en tu corazón, en tu mente en este momento.
but to see a miracle in your heart, in your
Una
mind in this moment.
transformación.
It's transformation.
Pastores, por favor, si nos ponemos de pie.
Pastors, please, if we could just stand.
Todo pastor, por
All the
favor.
pastors, please.
Hagamos una oración.
Let's make a prayer.
Visualice
Visualize
la fructificación
the fruitfulness
y visualice la multiplicación.
and visualize multiplication.
Abramos nuestra boca y comenzamos a fluir.
Let's open our mouth and just begin to flow.